Claire walked into the grand hall with nervous steps. She was not dressed like the other guests. She wore a simple dress that fit her well, but did not shine like the gowns around her. She was not here to mingle with the rich. She was here to work. The company had asked her to help serve at the gala, and she had accepted without thinking twice. She needed the money, and this job, even for a night, could help her pay her bills. She told herself to keep her head down and do her work. The hall sparkled with lights. Waiters moved quickly between tables. Laughter and music filled the air. Claire carried a tray of glasses and kept her smile calm. She felt like a stranger in a world that was not hers. She walked to a table near the stage and set down the drinks. When she looked up, she noticed a man sitting at the corner who was different from the others. He was not laughing or showing off. He was quiet and strong. His eyes were sharp, but there was also a kind sadness in them. His name was Ethan. People in the hall whispered about him. He was the CEO, a man who built his company from the ground and made it powerful. Yet he sat there, alone, watching everything as if he was far away from it. Claire did not know who he was at first. She only knew he carried himself with a calm strength. She tried not to stare, but her eyes kept returning to him. Ethan noticed her too. It was not her dress or her tray that caught his attention. It was her eyes. They were clear and honest. They did not shine with greed or hunger like so many others he had met. She moved with grace, not because she wanted to be seen, but because she was careful and thoughtful. For a man like Ethan, who had spent years reading faces, hers was different. He felt a strange pull toward her. The music changed, and the guests turned to the stage. Claire used the moment to step back. She tried to leave the room for a breath of air, but as she moved, she heard a soft voice. She looked down and saw two little girls sitting at the edge of the hall. They were watching the crowd with wide eyes. Their hair was neatly tied, their white dresses pressed, but they looked restless. One of them dropped a small ribbon on the floor. Claire bent down, picked it up, and handed it back with a smile. The girls giggled and looked at her as if she was the first friendly face they had seen that evening. Claire asked them softly if they were enjoying the party. They shook their heads and whispered that it was too long and too boring. Claire laughed quietly and told them that sometimes grown-up parties feel that way. She made a small funny face that made the girls laugh again. Ethan saw it all from his chair. His daughters were shy with most people, but with this woman they laughed freely. It was rare. He leaned forward, his gaze fixed on her. He wondered why his daughters felt safe with her so quickly. He stood up and walked toward them. The guests noticed his movement, and the room fell silent for a brief moment. Everyone respected him, but few dared to come close. Claire straightened as Ethan reached them. She thought he might be upset that she was speaking to his daughters. Instead, he looked at her with a calm but curious expression. He thanked her for watching over them. His voice was low, steady, and deep. Claire nodded quickly, unsure what to say. Her heart beat faster. Not out of fear, but something she could not explain. The girls pulled at their father's sleeve and told him they liked her. Ethan looked at them, then back at Claire. In that moment, he felt something stir in his chest. He had not planned it, but he knew this was not the last time he would speak to her. He did not know her story or her life, but there was something in her presence that felt different from all the noise around them. Claire excused herself and returned to her work. Yet as she carried her tray, her thoughts were no longer clear. The image of Ethan and his daughters stayed in her mind. She did not know why she cared, but she did. Ethan watched her go, his daughters holding his hands. A thread had been tied between them, silent and unseen, but strong enough to be felt. Neither of them could name it, but both would soon learn it was the beginning of something that could change everything. The night after the gala stayed in Claire's mind. She tried to forget the tall man with steady eyes and the two little girls with gentle smiles, but she could not. She told herself she was foolish. He was a CEO, and she was a young woman working simple jobs. Their worlds were not the same. Yet the memory of their meeting followed her like a soft voice she could not silence. Ethan sat in his office the next morning, his daughter's laughter still fresh in his ears. He had watched them warm up to Claire in a way they never did with strangers. He had spent years trying to protect them from pain after their mother left. They trusted no one easily, not even the family friends who visited. But Claire had made them laugh in a matter of minutes. It made him wonder. He told himself she was just a kind girl passing by, yet his thoughts refused to leave her face. Lily and Grace, his daughters, had questions of their own. As Ethan drove them to school, Grace asked if they would see the nice lady again. Ethan paused, caught off guard. He did not know how to answer. Told them maybe, but his heart felt the weight of their hope. He could not promise anything he was not sure about. Claire returned to her small apartment after the gala, counting the little money she had earned. The rent was due, and she still had bills waiting. She sighed, placing the coins and notes on the table. Life was not easy, but she tried to stay strong. She remembered the way Ethan had looked at her, not as if she was invisible, but as if she mattered. That thought warmed her more than she wished to admit. The following week brought a surprise. Claire was asked to help at the company headquarters for a few days, handling small tasks. She walked into the tall glass building with nervous steps. The office was busy and bright. She tried to keep her head down, but when she entered the main hall, she saw him again. Ethan was standing near the window, speaking with one of his managers. He turned, and his eyes met hers. For a moment, the world around them seemed to stop. Ethan dismissed the manager and walked toward her. Claire froze, unsure if she should run or stay. He greeted her calmly and asked how she had been since the gala. His tone was simple, but his gaze carried weight. She answered softly that she was fine, trying not to let her nerves show. Ethan noticed her unease, but did not push. Instead, he thanked her again for being kind to his daughters. Claire smiled and said they were sweet girls. Ethan's lips curved slightly, almost like a hidden smile. Later that day, while Claire was arranging files in the hall, Lily and Grace arrived with their nanny. They saw her and ran forward with joy. Their laughter filled the air as they hugged her legs. Claire bent down, hugging them back. The nanny was surprised, as the girls were usually shy. Ethan, who was watching from his office window, felt his chest tighten. He realized the bond between his daughters and Claire was stronger than he thought. That evening, Ethan invited Claire to join him and the girls for a simple dinner at a quiet restaurant. At first, Claire hesitated. She felt it was not her place. But the girls begged her, their voices filled with excitement, and she could not say no. They sat together at the table, the girls chattering happily while Ethan watched them all. Claire listened to their stories and laughed softly at their playful words. Ethan noticed how her presence made the table feel warm, almost like a family he thought he would never have again. As the night ended, Claire walked out of the restaurant with them. The cool air brushed against her face. Ethan stopped beside her, his daughters holding his hands. For a moment, his steady voice broke the silence. He told her she was different from anyone he had met. Claire's heart skipped, but she only smiled faintly, unsure what to reply. Ethan looked at her one last time before guiding his daughters to the car. When Claire returned home, she lay awake in her bed, her thoughts circling around Ethan and the girls. She told herself not to hope, but hope was already there, quietly weaving itself into her heart. Ethan, in his own home, sat by the window while his daughters slept. He thought of Claire and the way she had brought light to their evening. A quiet question formed in his mind, one he had not dared to ask in years. Could this be the beginning of something more than chance? Claire woke early the next morning with thoughts she could not push away. She told herself to stop thinking about Ethan and his daughters, but every moment from the dinner stayed with her. She had never met children so sweet, nor a man so serious yet gentle when he was with them. She knew she should keep her distance. Their lives were not the same, and she had no place in his world. Still, her heart whispered something her mind refused to accept. Ethan was facing his own storm of thoughts. In his office, he stared at papers, but read none of them. His managers came and went, speaking of numbers and projects, but his mind drifted to Claire. He remembered her quiet smile, the way she bent down to listen to his daughters, the warmth she brought without trying. He had built his life on order and logic, yet now he found himself caught by a feeling he could not explain. He had been careful for so long, keeping his heart locked. But with her, the lock seemed weak. The next day, Claire was again asked to help at the company. She told herself it was just work, but when she entered the building, she felt her chest tighten. She wanted to avoid Ethan, yet part of her wished to see him. As she carried papers across the hall, she heard small footsteps rushing toward her. Lily and Grace ran to her side, calling her name. Their joy was so bright that everyone in the office turned to watch. Claire laughed, hugging them gently. The staff whispered, surprised at how the daughters of their serious CEO were so close to a woman who was not part of their circle. Ethan appeared soon after, his steady gaze fixed on them. He walked closer, and his managers moved aside. He asked Claire if she had time to join them again for dinner that evening. His words were calm, but his eyes held something deeper. Claire hesitated, her heart racing, but Lily and Grace begged her, their hands clutching hers. She nodded, unable to say no. That evening they met again, this time at Ethan's private home. Claire felt nervous as she stepped inside the tall house with wide windows and quiet halls. She expected it to feel cold, but instead, she saw touches of family everywhere. Drawings by the girls hung on the walls. Small toys sat near the sofa. It was not a palace of glass, but a home that carried both love and silence. They shared dinner together at the long table. The girls talked about school, about a small play they wanted to perform, and about a pet they wished to have. Ethan listened patiently, but it was Claire who leaned in and asked questions that made the girls' eyes light up. She laughed with them, clapped softly at their stories, and encouraged their dreams. Ethan watched the scene in silence, his chest heavy with emotions he had buried long ago. He could see what his daughter saw. She belonged here. When the girls went to bed, Ethan asked Claire to stay for tea. They sat across from each other in the quiet living room. The lights were soft, and the sound of the night filled the silence between them. Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady but low. He told her that his daughters had not laughed like that in years, not since their mother left. His eyes held both pain and hope. He thanked her for giving them something precious without even trying. Claire's heart ached at his words. She wanted to tell him that she only did what felt natural. She wanted to tell him she cared more than she should, but the words stayed locked inside. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then spoke words that changed everything. He said with a tone that was both firm and gentle, "Wed me, and I will help you raise your daughters." Claire froze, her breath caught in her chest. She'd expected kindness, maybe even a small confession, but not this. His eyes were steady, his face calm, but she could see the storm of truth behind his words. She felt her hands tremble. She did not know if he spoke from duty, from need, or from love. She only knew that her life had just shifted, and nothing would ever be the same again. Claire sat still, her mind spinning after Ethan's words. She could not believe what she had just heard. Marriage was not something one offered so simply. Not from a man like him, not to someone like her. She searched his face for a sign of jest, but his eyes were steady, his voice calm, and his expression serious. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. She only shook her head slightly, unsure if she had understood him correctly. Ethan leaned back, watching her reaction with quiet patience. He had spoken from the weight of his heart, though he knew the way it sounded might shock her. He was not a man who wasted words, and when he said something, he meant it. He had lived too long in silence and duty to throw words around carelessly. He felt the truth in every syllable. He wanted her near, not only for his daughters, but also for himself, though he could not yet admit it plainly. Claire finally found her voice. She asked him softly why he would say such a thing. Ethan looked into her eyes and explained that his daughters needed someone who understood them. They needed warmth, laughter, and care. He admitted that he had seen those things in her. He added that he was tired of empty company, tired of people who only wanted his name or his money. She was different, and that difference mattered more than he could explain. Her heart pounded as she listened. His words touched her deeply, but they also scared her. Marriage was more than helping children, more than duty. It was a bond of souls, and she was not sure he truly saw her that way. She looked down at her hands, wondering if she was strong enough to step into a life that seemed far beyond her reach. She cared for his daughters, yes, but was that enough to tie herself to him forever? The silence stretched between them until the sound of footsteps broke it. Lily and Grace came rushing into the room, their hair a little messy from sleep. They carried small blankets and looked at Claire with tired eyes that still sparkled. They climbed onto the sofa beside her, leaning against her arms, as if they had known her forever. Claire wrapped her arms around them, her heart softening as they nestled close. Ethan watched them, a silent thought forming in his mind that this picture was what he wanted to see every day. After the girls returned to bed, Claire stood and told Ethan she needed time to think. She thanked him for his honesty, then excused herself. The night air outside was cool as she walked home, but her mind was hot with confusion. She knew he was serious. She knew the girls loved her. She also knew her life was simple, and stepping into his world would change everything. She lay awake long into the night, her heart torn between fear and longing. Ethan, in his study, poured himself a glass of water and stared at the dark city through the tall windows. He wondered if he had spoken too soon, but he did not regret it. He had spent years hiding from his own heart. For once he had chosen to speak what he felt, even if it left him exposed. He thought of her smile, of the way his daughters laughed with her, and he told himself that he would not give up easily. The days that followed were filled with quiet tension. Claire continued to help at the company. Though she avoided being alone with Ethan, she could feel his eyes on her at times, steady and searching, but he did not press her for an answer. He respected her silence, though inside he longed for her reply. The girls, unaware of the storm between their father and Claire, continued to cling to her happily, their laughter filling the halls. One afternoon, Claire found herself in the garden outside the office. She sat on a bench, staring at the flowers, trying to clear her mind. Ethan walked out quietly and stood near her. The silence between them was not heavy, but gentle, like the air before a soft rain. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice low. He told her he did not want her to feel forced. He wanted her to know that his words came from truth, not convenience. He would wait no matter how long it took, because some things were worth waiting for. Claire looked at him then, really looked at him. She saw not only a powerful man, but a father who carried love and pain, a man who sought more than wealth or success. She still did not know if she could give him the answer he wanted, but she knew one thing clearly. The thread between them was real, and it was pulling her closer with every passing day. The days moved quietly, yet the bond between Claire and Ethan's daughters grew stronger with each passing moment. Lily and Grace began to look for her the instant they entered the office. They brought her drawings, small stories, and questions about everything they saw. Claire answered with patience, always kneeling down to meet their eyes, always listening with care. Their laughter rose in the air like a melody that followed her everywhere she went. Ethan noticed it all. He watched from the doorway of his office as Claire helped the girls with their school projects. He saw the way her face softened when they hugged her tightly. He heard the way their voices brightened when they spoke her name. His heart, which had been locked for so many years, began to open with a quiet ache. He told himself he had been right to ask her. She was not only someone his daughters loved, but also someone he needed. Yet Claire's heart still wrestled with doubt. Each night, when she returned to her small apartment, she wondered if she could truly belong in Ethan's world. She was an ordinary woman, with no riches, no grand background, no place among business leaders. Could she really stand beside a man like him, a man whose name carried weight in every room? She feared that stepping into his life would only bring whispers and judgment. More than that, she feared giving her heart only to have it broken. The girls, however, had dreams of their own. One evening, as Ethan tucked them into bed, Lily whispered that she wished Claire could live with them forever. Grace agreed, saying that Claire felt like family. Ethan listened in silence, his chest tightening with emotion. He kissed their foreheads and told them to sleep, but their innocent wish stayed in his mind long after they closed their eyes. The following weekend, Ethan invited Claire and the girls to the park. The sun was warm, and families filled the open fields. Lily and Grace ran ahead, their laughter echoing as they chased each other. Claire and Ethan walked behind them, their steps falling into rhythm. For a while they said nothing, but the quiet between them was not heavy. It was calm like the soft breeze that moved through the trees. Finally, Claire spoke. She told Ethan that she cared for his daughters deeply, that they had become precious to her in a way she had not expected. Her voice trembled as she admitted that being close to them made her both happy and afraid. She was afraid of failing them, of stepping into a life she was not prepared for. Ethan listened without interruption. His gaze was steady, his silence patient. When she finished, he told her gently that fear was natural, but what mattered most was the heart. He said he had seen her heart, and it was stronger than she realized. Claire looked at him, surprised by his words. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever seen her as more than what she appeared on the surface. For a moment her doubts eased, replaced by warmth. Yet the question still lingered. Was love truly growing between them? Or was this only a bond of care for the children? As the day ended, they sat together on a bench while the girls played nearby. Ethan turned toward her, his voice quiet but firm. He told her again that he meant every word he had said, wanted her in his life, not only for his daughters, but also for himself. He admitted that he had not planned to feel this way, but now he could not imagine a future without her. Claire's breath caught, her eyes filling with emotion. She could not answer, not yet, but her heart was moved deeper than she wished to show. That night, as Claire walked home, Lily and Grace's laughter echoed in her mind. She saw their faces, their small hands reaching for hers, their eyes full of trust. She also saw Ethan's steady gaze, filled with a truth she could no longer deny. She lay awake in bed, knowing her life was changing. She was no longer standing on the edge of his world. She was already part of it, bound not by choice, but by something stronger, something that felt like fate. The bond between Claire and Ethan grew stronger with each day, but with it came new shadows. The city was full of eyes that followed Ethan's every move. When people began to notice how often Claire was seen with him and his daughters, whispers spread. Some said she was only after his wealth. Others claimed she was using his daughters to reach his heart. Claire heard the rumors from a coworker, and her chest grew heavy with doubt. She wondered if everyone would think she was unworthy of standing beside him. Ethan, too, began to sense the tension. His managers grew curious, asking quiet questions about the woman who had captured his daughter's affection. A rival in his business even made sly comments, hinting that Ethan had let his guard down. For a man who had built his life on strength and control, these whispers struck like hidden knives. He did not care for their approval, yet he feared what their poison might do to Claire. One afternoon, Claire walked into the office carrying documents. As she passed through the hall, she heard two women speaking in low voices. They said Ethan would never marry someone like her, that she was just a passing distraction. Their words cut deep, though she tried to keep her face calm. She delivered the papers and left quickly, her hands trembling. In her heart, a storm of doubt rose, stronger than before. That evening, Ethan invited her once again to dinner with his daughters. Claire came, but her smile was faint. Lily and Grace ran to her joyfully, but she struggled to match their energy. Ethan noticed at once. He asked her if something was wrong, but she shook her head and said she was only tired. The girls laughed and played, but Claire's heart was not at ease. She kept thinking of the whispers of the voices saying she did not belong. After the girls went to bed, Ethan and Claire sat in the living room. The silence was heavy, unlike the soft quiet they had shared before. Claire looked at him, her eyes uncertain, and asked if he truly meant his words. She asked if he had asked her to marry him out of duty for the sake of his daughters, or if there was something more. Ethan froze. He had never been a man of many words, but in that moment, his silence cut deeper than he intended. Claire mistook it for hesitation, and her chest ached. She stood, thanking him softly for the evening, then left before he could stop her. Ethan sat alone in the dim light, his heart heavy. He wanted to tell her the truth, that his feelings were deeper than he knew how to speak, but the words had caught in his throat. He realized too late that silence could wound as much as cruelty. He thought of his daughters, their joy when Claire was near, and felt the fear of losing it all. Claire walked home through the cool night, her steps slow, her heart torn. She told herself not to hope for more than she deserved. She reminded herself that men like Ethan lived in a world far above hers. Yet when she closed her eyes, she saw his face, his daughter's laughter, and the warmth she had felt in their home. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered that she could not belong there, no matter how much she wished it. The next day, Ethan tried to find her, but she avoided him. She focused on her tasks, her eyes down, her steps quick. The girls noticed her distance and asked her why she was sad, but she only smiled weakly and told them nothing was wrong. Ethan watched her from his office window, frustration building inside him. He had let his silence push her away, and now he feared he might lose her completely. That evening, he stood alone on his balcony, the city lights shining below. He thought of all the battles he had fought in business, of the victories and losses that had shaped him. None of them had ever made him feel as helpless as this. He knew he had to speak, to tell her everything he had held back. If he did not, the soul string between them would break under the weight of unspoken fears. He clenched his fists, promising himself that he would not let her slip away. He would fight, not with power or wealth, but with truth. The days after their quiet distance felt heavier than before. Claire tried to keep herself busy, but her thoughts returned to Ethan and the words he had spoken. His offer of marriage replayed in her mind, but doubt twisted it until she could no longer see the truth behind it. She told herself she must step back before she became lost in a dream that was never meant for her. Yet every time Lily and Grace ran into her arms, her resolve weakened. The girls had become a part of her heart, and walking away from them felt like tearing herself apart. Ethan could not ignore the change either. His daughters asked daily why Claire seemed sad, why she no longer smiled the way she used to. He had no answer, only guilt. He knew his silence had pushed her away, and it was time to set it right. He had never been a man of open feelings, but for her, for his daughters, he was ready to break the walls he had built around his heart. One evening, Ethan made a choice. He asked his daughters to stay with their nanny for the night, then went in search of Claire. She was leaving the office, her bag over her shoulder, her steps tired. When she saw him waiting by the entrance, her heart skipped, but she forced herself to stay calm. He asked her to walk with him. At first she hesitated, then nodded quietly. They walked down the quiet street, the city lights glowing above them. For a while, they said nothing, the sound of their footsteps filling the silence. Then Ethan stopped and turned to her. His eyes were steady, his voice low but clear. He told her that he had failed to explain himself before, but he would not fail again. He said he had asked her to marry him not only for his daughters, though they were part of it, but because she had touched his heart in a way no one else ever had. Claire listened, her chest tight. Ethan went on, speaking words he had held for too long. He told her that since the moment he saw her, he had felt something he could not name. When he saw her with his daughters, he knew she was someone rare, someone who could bring warmth back into their lives. He admitted he was afraid of being hurt again, but more afraid of losing her. He ended by saying he loved her, plain and true, and that his heart belonged to her as much as his daughters already did. Tears filled Claire's eyes as she heard his words. She had longed for him to say them, but she had feared he never would. She told him that she cared deeply for him and for the girls, but she was scared. She had no wealth, no name, nothing to offer but her love. Ethan reached for her hand and told her that love was everything. He needed nothing else. His voice was firm, his gaze unshaken, and for the first time she believed every word. The weight in her chest lifted, replaced by warmth. She smiled through her tears, whispering that she would marry him. Not for duty, not for protection, but because her heart had already chosen him. Ethan pulled her close, holding her with a strength that carried both relief and joy. In that moment, the world around them faded, and all that remained was the bond that tied them together. When Lily and Grace learned the news, their laughter filled the house. They clapped their hands, hugged Claire tightly, and told her they had wished for this all along. Their innocent joy sealed the promise between Ethan and Claire. The house that had once felt heavy with silence now bloomed with laughter and warmth. On the day of their small wedding, the hall was simple, but full of light. Friends, employees, and loved ones gathered, but the only faces that mattered were the two little girls smiling beside them. Claire walked down the aisle with a steady heart, her eyes on Ethan, who waited with a quiet smile. When they spoke their vows, it was not just words of promise, but a binding of souls, tied by something greater than fate. From that day forward, their lives changed. They faced challenges, as all families do, but together they stood strong. The whispers of doubt from the world outside no longer mattered. What mattered was the home they built, the love that grew, and the invisible string that had brought them together. It was a soul string, unbreakable, binding not just to hearts but for forever.